end of. So we are now being recorded. And like Brian said, if you have any questions, you're welcome to ask it either during the presentation afterwards, or you can send it in the chat. Brian's going to help me watch the chat a little bit this evening. Before I get started on my presentation, I did want to talk to you about a wonderful opportunity that has been presented to West Pikeland and the Chester Springs Library. Linda Reichert, who is also part of the Environmental Advisory Council, worked with Nancy, the librarian, to apply for and receive a grant from the library's Transforming Communities, focus on small and rural libraries organization or opportunity. And we have three topics coming up to talk about renewable energy for our community, and you can see the times there. You can also go on the West Pikeland website to find out more information about these topics. But June 5th, write that down, at 4 p.m., July 26th at 7, and September 11th at 4 p.m. Hope to see you there as well. And these will be in person. As you see, they'll be outside, all of them. So we'll be, following all the guidelines for that. I wanted to share with you that we're having another paper shredding event coming up June 12th. It starts at 9 a.m. at the Township building. You can find out more information about that as well. And we're partnering with the Chester County Health Department. They're going to be offering free COVID vaccines at that event. So there'll be a tent set up, and it's the J&J vaccine. So it's the one shot vaccine if you're interested in obtaining the vaccine there.
Hey Donna, could we go back a couple slides? It was just missed when the recording triggered, just for your card. One more, I believe. Here we go. Yep.
Okay, so this is how you can get in touch with me if you have any further questions that you don't feel comfortable asking this evening. Okay, so we're going to take 20 seconds here, and we are going to do a little quiz. And I would like for you to identify for all of these items whether or not you can put them in your recycling bin for your waste disposal company. You ready? 20 seconds. Here we go. Okay, time is up. What do you think? How many did you get right? Or how many are you confused about? So just briefly, what this picture represents here is that even though many of these things may have a recycling symbol on them, or we might think that they're recyclable, we may not be able to put them in our recycling bin out at our curbside for our waste disposal vendor to pick them up. And it's more about logistics of the recycling company than it is about what these materials are made of. So for example, a pizza box is cardboard, right? And you think cardboard is a recyclable material, and in fact it is. The problem with the pizza box, though, is that the grease and the cheese from the pizza gets absorbed into the cardboard, and that renders it unrecyclable at a public facility, or an industrial recycling facility. So, and these are polystyrene, and although polystyrene is recyclable, it is not, there are not many companies that accept that kind of plastic for recycling. So they may stamp a symbol on there, but it's not really a good material that's recycled in a lot of facilities. Alkaline batteries, unfortunately, have no real good resources in them that can be pulled out and recycled. So again, those are really just waste. Anybody have any questions about that or comments? Or Linda got them all right? That's awesome. Surprise anybody? Okay, so a question came in from John and said, I thought the plastic bottle lids had to come off. And that is an excellent question. And I want to answer here that it depends. It depends on what your recycling facility can accept. And we'll talk about that in more detail. So thanks for bringing that up, John. Okay.
Why the maybe? I'm sorry. Why the maybe on the bottle?
Well, because it depends, it depends on what your recycling facility can process. And I think as we talk a little bit further on, I'll be explaining in a lot more detail about what is processable at your recycling facilities.
Very good.
Your recycling facility versus what is actually recyclable. And then I have some alternatives that you can use to recycle the things that maybe your disposal facility can't handle. So good question, thank you. Okay, so 4.9 pounds. Why do you think this number is important? What do you think this number means? That is how many pounds per person per day of waste that we generate. That's almost 5 pounds a day per person. To me, that's a pretty significant number. And what I would like to talk about today is how we can actually reduce those pounds from getting into our landfill. So I'll be talking about the benefits of recycling, what your recycling company expects to see in their recycling bin. And if I'm not talking about your company specifically, I have some links at the back of the presentation that you can go to find out what your disposal company can accept, and then what you can do and what I can do as a waste generator to enable our disposal companies to recycle these materials a lot more effectively. And when you can recycle them more effectively, they can sell them better and they get more money for them. And then that equates to reduced cost for you as the generator. Okay, so during your lifetime, you will produce so much trash that it will weigh 600 times as much as you do. So for me, that's 45 tons of trash that I will generate in my lifetime. So to put that in perspective, a Mack truck weighs less than that. A Mack truck weighs only 31 tons, right? So think about that. 45 tons of trash is what I'm going to be generating in my lifetime. And I am on a mission to reduce that for myself and hopefully inspire you to do that as well. And because I am a geek and I love statistics, I had to throw a chart in here. This is just a representation of how much waste since the 60s the US has been disposing of. I got this information from the EPA, United States Environmental Protection Agency, their website. So what this is showing you here, in my opinion, some of my takeaways is that we have, since in my lifetime, we've tripled the amount of waste that we're generating on an annual basis. Now, that could also be as a result of an increase in population. But if you notice here, I put that red line right in the middle. And it looks really like the amount that we're landfilling in all of that time has stayed pretty stable. It's a pretty steady level of tons per year that are going to landfill. And what you'll see here is that we've really increased alternatives to landfill, most of which is recycling. And you also have here composting, which is a new thing that the EPA is now encouraging and tracking, as well as combustion with energy recovery. And people have a lot of different opinions about combustion with energy recovery. And if you want to have an off-screen discussion about that, please get in contact with me. So Will I Am, he's with the Black Eyed Peas. He said, waste is only waste if we waste it. And so what I'm here to talk about today is how we can keep materials from actually becoming waste. And the definition of recycling is to treat or process used materials or wastes so that we can use those materials again. So the main topics here are you have to treat or process those materials so that we can use them again. So this stops us from wasting useful materials if we can recycle, right? So that plastic bottle, if you can recycle it, you're going to treat it and process it and turn it into new plastic materials. That prevents more plastic from having to be developed, and it keeps materials out of the landfill. So then, has anybody heard the term wish cycling? And what do you think wish cycling is? Anybody have any ideas? Hearing none, I'll say that, and I'll talk more about it, but wish cycling is where you think something is recyclable, or you really want it to be recyclable because you just don't want to throw it away. So you put it in your recycle bin, but it really cannot be recycled. And that is an example of that is the styrofoam containers. So. Okay, so why isn't recycling important? Well, I mentioned earlier that it reduces the amount of materials that we actually have to utilize, the raw materials, whether it's mining them out of the ground for the metals or making the plastics, and plastic comes from fossil fuels, from petroleum. That petroleum is one of the feedstocks for plastic. So if you're reusing the plastic over and over again, you're not having to rely on fresh petroleum to generate new plastics. It also reduces the amount of energy that we use. It costs or takes less energy to reprocess something rather than extract it and turn it into something new. It reduces air pollution, water usage, and it lowers the amount of greenhouse gas emissions, which is blamed for global warming. So a statistic I found here is that each ton of recycled paper saves 17 trees, which is awesome, and 7,000 gallons of water. And another really important resource to me is water. So saving water to me is really important. Now we live in the part of the country where we don't get many droughts like they do in like Arizona and California, but we were discussing before the presentation tonight that it hasn't rained in like 6 weeks. So anyway, so I like to save water as well, conserve water. So I just have another little factoid here is that last November, West Pikeland Township put on a paper shredding event, and we collected and shredded 3 tons of paper, and that paper is going to be recycled. So I just want you to do the math on how many trees and how many gallons of water we saved. Pretty awesome. So there's really 3 R's to waste management. I think you've all seen this symbol here with the 3 arrows: reduce, reuse, and recycle. Now, over time, it has kind of expanded. There's other R's that they're throwing in here, but these are the basic ones. And I feel like I wanted to kind of stick with the EPA's message when I talked about this. And also, you can kind of see the progression of how I like to look at material use and how I would like to encourage you to look at material use as well. So the first one is to reduce. And what that means is you just don't use it. So you either, like when you bring a bag with you grocery shopping, you don't have to use those plastic bags. Or when you're getting takeout, instead of having them throw in all the plasticware and the straws and the salt and pepper and all that, ask them not to put it in. Because many times we're just throwing all those things away, and if you don't actually take them, you won't have to throw them away. So this, by reducing what you're purchasing, using, you can generate a smaller amount of waste. If you need to get that plastic bag, and frankly, sometimes we do need to get the plastic bag, right? The next step then would be to reuse that bag. I like to reuse my bags as much as I can. I actually wash out my like Ziploc bags, so I can reuse them, not always for food, but maybe for other things around the house. I like to use it to dispose of my kitty litter, after that's been used. So reusing something, or you can give it away. So for example, your clothes or your shoes, that, there's Goodwill, there's other places where you can give your gently used clothing and shoes that they can then have other people reuse instead of you. And then the last thing that you should do before something goes into a landfill would be to recycle it. And recycling is, again, processing something and making it into new materials. So those are the 3 R's. So let's talk specifically now about material recycling. And I'm going to go through the steps of recycling. So the first step is that we, the generator, sort them into the different bins and categories. And here I've listed some categories. I'm sure that you've seen a bunch of different bins at the airport. I don't know if you've been to the airport before COVID. It was the same way. They have like 4 or 5 different bins there for all the different types of recyclable materials. So what we're doing, we say we're recycling, but what we're really doing is we're just sorting our resources at this point, at this stage, when we put them into the bin. A lot of the companies that we're using in this area collect what they call single stream or commingled recycling. And what that means is that in one bin, you can throw all your different types of recyclable materials. So that is actually a good thing for generators, which is what we are. We're generating the waste, and it's really kind of easy to put everything into one bin and set it out by the curb, but it creates a problem when you're trying to process it. And I'll show you some pictures of that in a minute. So the first step is sorting our resources. I'm not calling them waste because I feel like there's precious stuff in there that we can reuse. So I'll just call them resources. Then what we do is the materials have to then be brought to a facility for further processing, right? That's the second step of recycling. So you can either set them out by your curbside and have the truck pick them up, or you can bring it to a off-site location or a recycling center. Some examples of that are, for example, at the Lancaster landfill, they will accept your electronics. So they will take your electronics and have all the precious metals pulled out and recycled. I think they do the plastics as well. Or, for example, you can bring your waste oil back to Pep Boys. I believe they still do that. Or when you buy a battery at one of the big box stores, you can exchange your car battery for a new one. So what they're doing is they're at the collection site for spent batteries or waste oil, for example. Okay, so then once it gets sent to the recycling facility, it gets sorted and sold. So this is actually, I've had the pleasure of being at a recycling facility. It's by the Republic, it's the Republic facility in King of Prussia, and there are conveyor belts of resources being moved around, and there are people, sometimes they use magnets to pull the metals out, and they're using air to drop out the paper and separate the paper from the plastics. But the first step, and all throughout the whole process, you have people that are sorting through what we're throwing away in our trash bin, so that they are eyeballing what they're seeing and pulling it out so that they can be further sorted into the different components. And this is why I think single stream recycling is not as efficient when it gets to the recycling facility, because you have all this labor and you have all this effort then to sort it out again. But like I said, it's easier for us as homeowners and as generators to put everything into one bin instead of trying to figure out, having 7 different bins on our curbside and trying to fill those all up every week. So then at the recycling facility, everything gets sorted. And then what you see is these big piles of materials. So these happen to be plastic. I think there are milk bottles over here. These happen to be I can't really see. I think these are other plastics. So what the recycling facility does is they'll take these materials, combine them into a single type, and then they sell them, right? They sell them. We used to be able to sell them to China, but we can't. China refuses to accept them anymore, and I'll talk about that, about why in a minute. But then these recycling facilities are getting money for these materials. And then what happens is whoever's buying them are cleaning the materials and then shredding them, melting them, crushing them, shredding them into smaller materials, then melting them down and making them into new products. So I want to thank Republic. This is I had a little field trip here. I'm in this picture here, and I think there's someone else on this call that is also in this picture. But the reason why China stopped taking our materials is because we aren't sorting. That first step isn't being handled properly. So the result of that is that 60% of what we put in our recycling bin, that's more than half, actually only about 60% gets recycled. So a little bit more than half of what we put in our recycling bins actually gets sorted, processed, bound, sold, and then made into other products. And that, to me, that number is what we need to improve, that 60%. So what Mr. Penning said was that if we don't get it clean, we're not going to be able to market it. And if we can't market it, unfortunately, it goes to the landfill. So it's not about the fact that your pizza box isn't made of cardboard, right? It is made of cardboard, and cardboard is a very recyclable material. The problem is that we're sending it to the recycling facility in a manner that they can't clean it. When it has the cheese and the grease and the crusts in there, the recycling facility has to throw that away because they can't sell greasy, dirty cardboard to a processor who is then going to pulp it up, shred it up, and turn it into other paper products. So then how do we increase the productivity of recycling? How do we get more than 60% that we put in the bin into the actual circular economy is a new terminology that people are saying. And I would have to say that it starts with the first step. It's really our responsibility to find out the realities of the recycling process and what we have to do as part of that process. And the first thing that we have to do is keep materials out of the recycling bin that don't belong there, like liquids, food, other contaminants, I'll call them. No loose plastic bags and no bag recyclables. So you might think you're making a nice, neat pile when you're putting your paper into a plastic bag and putting it in the recycling bin, but that's actually hurting the recycling facility's chances of getting to that paper, which is the good recyclable material. So what we need to do is we need to put into our recycling bin clean bottles, cans, paper, and cardboard, and that's it. So the first step is to know what your recycling company. Okay, so this is saying how clean is clean enough. Some plastic tubes are pretty tough to get out, to clean out fully, and that is true. So they say rinsed. So this on this slide, I went to Blazinski because they happen to be the company that I use at my home. So it was just kind of easy for me to use them. But I have the links to many of the other recycling companies in this area that you can go to see what they can accept. It's going to be generally the same. So they say rinse clean, and they also say that labels and lids may be left on. So John's question at the beginning was, I thought the lids couldn't be on. Well, for Blazinski, they can deal with the lids. Now, I don't know, and they may be able to deal with the lids because whoever is buying the plastic from them can probably process those lids. So crush cans or don't crush cans? That's a good question as well. So can crushing is about reducing the volume in your bin. So the recycling company is going to crush it anyway. So it doesn't matter to them how they receive it, crushed or not crushed. But by you crushing it, you're going to have more room in your bin for other things. Many countries in Europe have 6 types of bins for recycling, and it's a matter of practice. Could we incentivize residents for doing a good job on recycling? That is true, that there are other countries that recycle way better than we do. And as a matter of fact, there's laws in Germany, and unfortunately I don't have the specifics off the top of my head, but if you're interested, I can do a little more research for you offline. Where they actually require the people who are making the products, you know, so your soda company, for example, the German regulation is making the soda companies take their products back or take their cans back so that they can recycle the cans, and the consumer doesn't have to think about disposal of that container once they're done the product. So, I mean, we used to do that. I remember my grandmother's kitchen. She had a wooden crate and all the Coke bottles were in there. So half of it was always full, you know, Coke bottles that were full, and the other half were empty. And they would switch them out as they went by, you know, as time went on. And then when they were all empty, they would go and exchange them for other ones. There's lots of different, okay, so milk cartons with plastic spouts. Again, that's a good question, and you'll have to look at your recycling company's website. Generally, for residential, they will not accept them. And I don't know the reason why, but I know that Republic will accept them, but only from like schools, because they have a huge volume, you know, of those little milk cartons that they have, or other industrial uses, like industrial cafeterias or hotels or things like that. So they'll accept like industrial quantities of those paper milk cartons, but not from residential. And it's probably just about how they have to process it. Unfortunately, it's the kind of equipment they have on site, and the buyers that they have. So.
And Donna, I want to make sure we don't miss Peggy's question. Can paper get wet? Some bids don't have lids. I know mine don't either, so it's a good question.
Mine don't either, and yes, paper can get wet. Ultimately, the paper is going to get wet when they process it anyway. So yes, the paper can get wet. And Linda has a comment here that says German stores will collect refrigerators and sell no matter how many years after the sale. Oh, the refrigerators they sell no matter how many years after the sale, right? So there are many industrial recycling infrastructure in the US. Like lead acid batteries has a really tightly integrated recycling process, because lead is such a commodity and it's so hazardous that the people who are making products with lead in them on purpose really want to keep a tight rein on lead. So that is one example of a really well-structured recycling system. There are other, I think waste oil probably is getting there as well, but there isn't as many incentives of getting waste oil to a recycler as there is lead acid batteries. Other states have you know, the 5 cents for returnable bottles and cans. So there are some incentives that we could do. It's just a matter of having implementation, and that's kind of a whole other topic that I would love to talk with you about. I don't, and maybe if we have time, I can talk about that a little bit more. So here is kind of a snapshot of what Blazinski wants to see. And here is a snapshot of what they can't accept. So like aluminum foil. To me, that's a little bit like wish cycling. Like, why not? Why can't aluminum foil? It's just aluminum. You're taking aluminum cans. Why can't you take aluminum foil? Well, the problem is, it's usually dirty, right? You know, your lasagna, you've got melted cheese all over it, or whatever it was stuck to. It could also be that it's so light that well, it's not magnetized, but it doesn't fall out of their sorting system. Remember the guys who were standing on the conveyor pulling them out? They might not be able to handle it that way. Paper towels is another one. And then that's kind of a hygiene thing. Like they don't want, you know, just kind of like needles, you know, there's a little bit of a biohazard potentially for that. Question from my daughter. Wait, I'm sorry, I'm seeing some questions here that I didn't see. In the state of PA, there's a requirement of manufacturing to take back and recycle their electronics. They need to report to the state. Okay, that's a good comment. So manufacturers are required to recycle their electronics. Yes. So from an industrial perspective, there's a lot of rules around waste that do not apply to residents. So like another thing, the electronics, that's a good example. Thank you for that. But waste oil and lead acid batteries and even fluorescent light bulbs have to be sent to a recycler, and you have to report to the state on how much you're sending it and where it went and when it was generated. So from an industrial perspective, there's a lot of regulation about recycling and waste management. But unfortunately, it doesn't trickle down to the residents. And for me, I think it would just be impossible to enforce. But that's my own opinion. So thank you for listening to my own opinion. A question for my daughter: can you recycle paper towels that are wet from cleaning spray? Well, paper towels in general cannot be recycled. So even if it has, you know, just the Clorox on it, or Lysol or whatever cleaning you're using, they don't want to see the paper towels in with the recycling bin. So once the paper towels are used, they need to be discarded into the trash, unfortunately. And that's a little bit of an example of wish cycling, right? You kind of wish that you could, because it's paper, why can't we use it? Or why can't we recycle it? So I have a little question here. It's kind of a theoretical question, but would you take the extra step to find a place that will recycle these materials? And I'll give you some examples of where you can do that, whether it's on a local, actually they're all local resources for you. So. Okay, so let's talk about plastic bags. These are kind of a scourge for me. They're made from recyclable material, right? They're plastic. They have a recyclable symbol on them, and you see the collection bins around. You know, if you go to Target, they've got the recycling center where you can bring your bags. A lot of times outside a grocery store, they'll have a bin that you can put your recycling bags, your plastic bags into recycle. Sometimes other facilities will provide a place for you to recycle your plastic bags. And again, and kind of the theme of this whole discussion is the limitation on recyclability for plastic bags is on your curbside recycling company. They just don't have the equipment to manage the plastic bags. And I have a comment here from Peggy that says you can recycle containers, you can get recycling containers from TerraCycle for things like coffee bags. Great comment, Peggy, thank you. And here it is here. TerraCycle is one of those companies that will accept oddball stuff. They'll take like the your yogurt lid, that's kind of the composite of metal and plastic. They'll take those. They'll take like toothpaste containers. They'll take makeup containers like your mascara or your compact containers. So TerraCycle is a really excellent company. They're out of Princeton area, so they're kind of local to us. They have the things that you send to TerraCycle, 0% of what you send to TerraCycle goes in the landfill. So a pretty amazing company with a really good opportunity for us to reduce the impact that we have on our recycling facilities. And the reason why TerraCycle can do that is because they are agile enough to find uses for materials and also to find buyers for some materials. Mark says the bins at grocery stores sometimes say plastic film. Does this category include plastic film bags such as newspapers delivered and plastic produce bags? Yes. Yes. So the plastic film that's exactly what that is. So yes, you can send them there as well. Another company that I'd like to talk about that has a similar approach to recyclables is Rabbit Recycling. And I have a link to both TerraCycle and Rabbit Recycling at the back of the presentation here. They have a whole list of materials that they'll accept. And it's the same concept where they'll send you a box, you fill it up, and then you mail it back to them. And, I kind of want to go back to my question, back here is, will you take that extra step? I would love to encourage all of us to take the extra step because, like I said, everything we throw away is going into a big hole in the ground and it has no value after that. Where if we can take this extra step and recover all of those materials and those resources from the landfill, then we'll be able to make them into new and better things. So,
Excuse me, Donna?
Go ahead, yes.
Yeah, I think your previous slide, the one point you had there wasn't maybe that emphasized because of the question. The limitation on recyclability is related to your curbside recycling company. They wreak havoc there. Your photo is a great photo of what happens with the strong. You try tearing a plastic bag, you can't do it.
Right.
That's what happens to the machinery. It gums the whole thing up.
Yes.
So it's absolutely essential. You put that in a separate stream.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. And yeah, I didn't really go over this, but and this really is the only reason why plastic bags can't be recycled through the curbside bins. That's kind of the distinction I'm making here, because the curbside bins are that single stream where they're going through warehouses full of equipment trying to sort, and people are standing there pulling these things out, trying to keep the bags from getting caught up in the machinery. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a picture of how these plastic bags actually are recycled. I don't know that process. So, yeah. But I'd be happy if you're interested afterwards. I can take a look and maybe find some pictures online that we can talk about. So another comment there's several comments here about the Eco Store in Phoenixville. They have a couple of TerraCycle containers you can use. Oh, that's interesting. So you can bring it there and then they'll pay for it. And that's another thing, is if you're using TerraCycle or other companies, you're probably going to have to pay extra to have them manage these materials. So the Eco Store in Phoenixville is fantastic. And I actually, Brian, right before our time this evening, he sent me a link to an article that talks about the Eco Store in Phoenixville. So they are definitely a resource for you. Richard says, can you speak to PAs preempting local communities from limiting single-use plastics? Politics. So yes, there are a lot of states that are pushing legislation through about limiting single-use plastics, and we would love to do that here in Pennsylvania. There's actually a senator who had a presentation on waste management in Pennsylvania, and it is something that people are talking about. It just hasn't been passed, and I don't really like to talk about politics. I think there's a lot of posturing going on, kind of the same old story. Yeah, that's all I can say about that in a public forum. But people are trying, so that's a good thing. So I think the Eco Store in the chat, they put the address of the Eco Store on Bridge Street in Phoenixville.
Yeah, it's just along the main road there.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
nice day to walk around, go check it out. It's a great
On
spot.
Fridays, because hopefully they'll start doing that again.
Yep.
Okay, so okay, moving on. Okay, so the last part, and I mentioned circular economy a little bit earlier, and the last part of a circular economy is that we as consumers have to buy materials that are made out of recyclable materials, right? So it's no use to do all that process where you're sorting it out at home, you're putting it in the bin, you're sending it on a big truck, you know, to a recycling center, you're sorting it out, you're cleaning it, you're selling it, you're processing it, and you're making it into new materials if no one's going to buy those materials. So I like to try to purchase materials that are made from recyclable materials. So I like to purchase products made from recyclable materials. I have a few examples down here. You know, toilet paper. Why are we killing trees for toilet paper? You know, why are we doing that? Why can't we use recyclable tissues and things like that? Same thing with trash bags. I put my trash in a plastic trash bag, but I like to have trash bags that are made out of recycled plastic, because at least it'll get one use before it goes into a landfill, right? So as a consumer, we need to be buying materials, and you'll see containers, some containers will say, for example, 35% post-consumer recycled material, you know, in the packaging made from 35% post-consumer. What that means is that 35% of the material that they're using went through that process that I described earlier, where it came from us to somebody's house, it was used, and then it was put in the recycle bin and reprocessed into that material, into that container. So to me, that's, you know, that's getting us there. The more we demand recycled content in our products, the more people are going to be willing to buy the plastic bottles that are being separated at our recycling facilities. But the key to that is to provide clean, kind of uncontaminated, recyclable materials so that they can be properly sorted and sold in a clean manner, as that gentleman Pennington had mentioned. So, any questions on that? So I'm kind of reaching the end of my discussion here. Reducing, in closing, reducing the number of resources you need, or you can refuse them, you can reuse materials, or you can repurpose them. That way, they won't become waste because you won't have had used them in the first place. The second step is, though, know what your recycling company wants. Take a few minutes and look on their website. They will. It's really easy to find on their website what materials they will accept. And then make sure that what you're giving them is what they want, and make sure that it's rinsed out. The other thing I would like to encourage everybody to do, I like to do it myself, is to find other outlets for recyclable materials like the plastic bags that we were talking about, but that they're not acceptable. So, you know, I mentioned a bunch of those earlier, and it's also listed up there a few slides back. And then ultimately, we need to reduce the contamination that's in our bin by keeping liquids, foods, and other unrecyclable materials or wish cycling materials out of those bins, so that what we're sending to the recycling facilities are purely recyclable materials, and they have an easier time of separating them into sellable resources. And then to close the loop of the circular economy, purchase items made from recycled materials. I really like to encourage that. So, any questions for me or any other comments? Here is the list. I said at the end I'll have a bunch of resources. The top portion is many of the local disposal and recycling companies that we have in this area. There's also the Chester County Solid Waste Authority. That's where, if you have an old electronic that you want to get rid of, if you go on their website, you can find out where you can drop that off for recycling. I have the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection link on here. And then the last couple of links here are for companies that recycle oddball things. The Nature Nut Project is the article about the Echo store in Phoenixville. The Loop store, that's interesting. You can buy products from them in returnable containers. So like shampoo, I think Redken, maybe it's not Redken, it's Pantene. Pantene is a product on the Loop store where they'll send you Pantene in a aluminum container, and you keep the box, and when you're done, you mail it back to them. So check out the Loop store if you're interested in that. Would be kind of a reuse situation. And then here is my email, or my website, where you can find my email address. So I have a comment here. Sorry to interfere. We need to talk about electronics recycling offline. Okay. PA passed regs a few years ago. Yes, Jose, if you want to give me a call, I will happily talk to you about electronics from a manufacturing perspective. For manufacturing, consumer can take their old electronics and trade them in when they buy a new electronics. Yeah. Jose, please contact me afterwards. I can also put my email address. I'll put that in the chat. Okay, I'm sending my email address to everyone. Okay, so, oh, sorry, I didn't know that was a direct message to me. Okay. So Maine, Vermont, and other states still have bottle laws and recycling drop-off facilities or store machines. It works. I agree, it works. Much of the money goes to nonprofits, schools, and churches, collect from the communities and fundraise for projects, and everyone wins. I agree that is closing the loop on getting those containers back. So yes. It would be nice if all the states had those types of take back programs, but Pennsylvania doesn't have it right now. So, but like I said, there are people that are talking about it in the in the Pennsylvania government. So it's not a dead topic. So.
What about frozen food cardboard, Donna?
Frozen food cardboard. Well, so the things I would look for on frozen food cardboard would be, first of all, does it have a recycling symbol on it? Because a lot of times Food product is a conglomeration of many different materials. So it may look and feel like cardboard to you, but it may have a layer of either plastic or metal, not if it's microwavable, but it may be different layers all kind of bound together. And so it makes it impossible to recycle at your typical recycling center. It may be something that TerraCycle can take back. But I would look for the recycling recycling symbol on it. And then also make sure that it's clean. If it has grease or any kind of food residue on it, it's not going to be acceptable. Can I answer any other questions? I have another message here. L'Oreal puts their hairspray in a nice aluminum aerosol bottle, but no recycle symbol. Should I throw it out? I would have to look. Again, it may be unrecyclable because of the propellant that it could potentially be in the container. And typically hairspray, believe it or not, is flammable. So it may cause a problem at a recycling facility. Although if you want to check out that Loop store, they may have hairspray in a returnable container. I see another comment here, sorry. Thank you, Sharon. I've heard glass is cost prohibitive to recycle, cheaper to make new. True. Glass is an interesting material. Glass is so recyclable, and it's been recycled for hundreds of years. They call it cull, when they crush up all the old glass and make it into new glass. So it's super recyclable. It does take a lot of energy, but not, I don't know the detail on which takes more, either recycling glass or not. The problem with glass is that it breaks. And once it breaks, now you're getting glass shards in the equipment, and now it's a hazard for people. So you have to look at your disposal facility's website to see if they take glass. Now, Blazinski takes glass because I guess they have a good way of keeping glass shards out of their processing operation. But many recycling companies don't take glass because it's not safe in a lot of cases. Sorry, I'm missing some of the comments here. How about batteries? Batteries are recyclable for sure. Lead acid batteries and like lithium ion batteries and nickel, cadmium, non-cad batteries. So anything out of your electronic equipment. The alkaline, like AA, AAA batteries, they're not recyclable, but anything with a heavy metal in it, it will have a recycling thing. And I think it has like a trash can with a red circle through it. Those are recyclable, but not in your waste bin or not in your curbside bin. Those have to be returned to a facility that will accept batteries. Now, Walmart, I believe, does take batteries if you bring them there. Although I would call the Walmart before you go with them. And there's also other resources for that. But the batteries, unfortunately, they have some hazardous materials in them. And so those are a little bit more tricky. Now, another thing that Chester County does, and you can go in that Chester County Solid Waste, the Chester County SWA org, the Chester County will have electronics recycling or household hazardous waste recycling days, and you can bring them there. And this website will have the list of days within the county that they're having household hazardous waste days. What can you do? Go ahead.
Yeah, Donna, quick question. I know you said that paper is okay when it gets wet. Is that apply to cardboard as well?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes. And then plastic wicker furniture. This is a good question. Again, it would take a couple of phone calls. to see if your recycling facility will take it. Another place that might take it is this Chester County Solid Waste Authority. They may have some advice on what you can do with plastic furniture. I think that having been to the recycling facility, I'm not sure that the equipment will accommodate a large piece of furniture like that. So I would make a phone call. They presented a year ago, recommended just throw away in the regular trash. Okay, so I guess there's a comment here that says, yes, just throw glass in the trash because it breaks. I threw out peanut butter plastic jars because it would take too much hot water to clean it. Yeah, peanut butter is an excellent problem. You do have to get peanut butter jars pretty clean. And so, right, it's the hot water thing. Do you use the energy to heat the water and waste the water to clean out the jar, or do you throw the jar in the trash? That's a conundrum, isn't it? I think that's a personal choice. So, but an excellent question. I throw out peanut butter jars. Oh yeah, agreed. Okay, I read that one, sorry. Or invest in a dog. Invest in a dog with a long tongue. They do love peanut butter, and boy, they get it cleaned, wouldn't they? Yeah, that's funny. Best Buy may take batteries. That is true. I do believe that they take batteries, but I would give them a call before you take them there. Peanut butter jars can go in your dishwasher, right? So you've got less impact from running water to clean that one thing. And Remark Glass in Philadelphia makes wonderful work from recycled glass bottles. They are at Bach School in South Philly. And that's another thing, is, trying to support local people who are making products and artwork out of reusable materials is another really excellent way to keep resources out of the landfill. So Staples or recycle used ink cartridges. Yes, that's true. And so Staples will take them back. And many times, well, I know my cartridges, you can just keep the box that they came in and mail the old one back. So it does cost you postage though. And Josephine says there is a link to the Electronic Recycling Act in Pennsylvania that is applicable to manufacturing. So there's a link there for anyone who's interested. Oh, and that was direct to me. Sorry. Okay, I'm not seeing this last comment here. Okay. WVT did household battery recycling last year and will do it again in October. So West Vincent Township did a household battery recycling last year and we'll do it again in October. So great. Hopefully, Sarah with West Vincent, you can either give us a heads up or let us know where that date is advertised. We'll be happy to put it on our website for you. So just to confirm, don't recycle glass containers. Okay, so Mike, my recommendation for the glass containers would be to look at your recycling vendor's website. So if you're with Blazinski, then they accept green, white, and or green, clear, and brown glass. So they will accept it. So I put glass in my recycling bin because I have Blazinski. So if you're not with Blazinski, then you take a look at your company, your disposal vendor, and they'll be clear about that. Certain size glass containers are nice little terrariums or planters. That's correct, yes. And okay. I think, okay, good with Blazinski. Good. Okay. Anything else? You sort your own recyclables, drive a load out to Lanchester landfill and Honeybrook area. They have trailers for you to place or dump into. even clean white styrofoam, but not peanuts. Okay, right. So that's another option for you, is to sort everything and drive it out to Lancaster. And again, Lancaster, you can find their location on this Chester County Solid Waste Authority website here. Well, it looks like we're at an hour. If I didn't answer your question, feel free to contact me offline and I'll be happy to work through your issue. I appreciate the kudos. Thank you, Linda and others who sent those along. Okay. I guess at this time, Brian, shall we stop recording and